This is Lightning Power Lunch with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli on Lightning Radio.
But they were excited, I think, just being able to be a part of it and get to see kind of what I do on a day-to-day basis. It's different than a lot of people, and I mean, without those guys, without them and family, I wouldn't probably be where I am today, especially with the siblings that you look up to and my brother and my sister. I try to be a role model as much as I can, so without them, wouldn't be where I am today. So being able to share this experience with them and them being able to join us is pretty cool.
We have a great relationship. I mean, we were both playing hockey, and only being a year and a half age difference is, we were always close. We were always doing everything together, from school to hockey to our friend group. So it's cool to have him here.
The season's long enough as it is, and you go on the road, and it can get like monotonous at times, and so to bring family members into your environment, something they don't really get to experience, especially not so much going to the games, but the daily, what happens during the day, and at times like how late you get into a place at night, and all the things that go with being a professional hockey player. And so I think it's a great experience for the families. I know the players love it, and there's no question it brings just a rejuvenated excitement to the team. And
little family trip.
Yes.
In the Berg.
I'm always excited to come on the air with you, though. I don't need family
You don't
members
need
to
family
keep me
members.
excited for.
Look, a lot of times the family members can see us do the show.
Yeah, that's true.
That's usually how it plays out. But you're in my neck of the woods.
Yeah, this is
born and
if
raised.
you're watching us on video, this is a happy coincidence that I have a big sign, Sportsnet Pittsburgh, behind.
I was going to say,
we are not on
Mish, where are you?
Well, we're not actually on the air for Sportsnet Pittsburgh. You have to find us elsewhere. But if you found us, you know that this is not a Pittsburgh show. Although
Listen,
we
I
will
knew
talk about the Penguins.
I knew Power Lunch was big. I didn't know Sportsnet Pittsburgh was picking us up too.
I will tell you, when I get to a road arena, I mean, I know all these road arenas, but I need a place to put my laptop, whether I had the camera or not. And I can always go to the press box, but if I can find a place a little closer to the ice,
sure,
I would prefer that. And some buildings don't have a lot of accessible areas, like they're in suites. I can't get into the suite, right? This particular building, though, they have these loge areas all the way around the top of the lower concourse.
Yeah.
And they're totally accessible. So I'm like, all right, I'm just going to sit here. I'm in Club Loge 19, row A, seat 3.
It's cold,
if that's
though, right?
your seat. You live in Pittsburgh. I'm borrowing the seat for the next
You said it was
hour.
cold when I talked to you.
Well, that would be true if I were in the
Very
Loge
cold
area or not. Yeah. Well, look, they want to keep the ice nice and fresh. And Sid might get his 600th goal tonight. Cooch might get his 900th point.
We got a lot to get to today because
we got a lot to get to today.
We want to get
lineup stuff for the Lightning.
Yeah, which is we're going to lead with that. Deandra Loux is going to be coming on with us, right? In 20, 30 minutes. She'll be
bottom of the hour.
Bottom of the hour. So she'll be on. We'll get into Pittsburgh. A lot of articles. I don't know if people subscribe to The Athletic, but man, some articles about the Penguins and what they should be doing. Already looking at potentially trading some veteran players away, not named Sidney Crosby. That's kind of how far they have fallen, and in some ways it's to be expected, but we can get into them in just a little bit as well. At Bolts Radio, if you want to react to anything we're going to say on X, my partner and I, Dave Mishkin, will be here till 1 o'clock. Of course, the game tonight at 7. Pregame is going to be at 6:30, and Steve Ersnick is our producer, so a lot of things to get to, but let's get to, I think, the news of the day for the Lightning, partner, when it comes to potentially what is the lineup going to look like and who's coming back. By the way, I hear a little echo in my headset. It's almost like I'm talking in the background.
Well, you sound fine to me.
Yeah,
the beauty of live radio and video.
That is something that you push through. But I wanted to say, I think a good lineup move coming in, and Gage Gonsalves, right?
Yeah,
is staying.
So we kicked this around yesterday, Greg, and I was feeling that. So we knew Gonsalves was sent back to Syracuse. So at the time I said, this is probably an indication that Brayden Point is returning. And I really felt, because the Lightning had played 2 really good games with an 11-7 formation, that it seemed likely that they would keep the 11-7 formation. And if that was the case, you're scratching 2 forwards, and one of those might be Gage Gonsalves. So it makes sense to have him go back to Syracuse rather than healthy scratch him. So I was kind of right, kind of wrong. Brayden Point is okay. He is going to play tonight. He's centering the top line with Gensel and Kucherov, and so that line is reunited. But Gonsalves showed enough that he's back up.
Yeah.
So Gonsalves is playing, and as a result, the Lightning are going with 12-6. So they're not going 11-7. So I guess what I should amend from my statement yesterday, if Point is able to return and the Lightning want Gonsalves to play, that means they're going to shift their lineup to 12-6. We'll see how it works tonight. Nick Perbix and Cam Atkinson are the extras. So Radish, who had a good showing, let's be honest, he had a good showing in the 2 games at home when the Lightning went 7D. He's in tonight. It's fluid still. I mean, do I think the Lightning aren't ever going to go back to 11-7? Well, ever. That's a drastic statement. Do I think it's possible they return to an 11-7 formation sometime soon? It's possible. I mean, particularly if they don't get a result tonight, maybe Coop's like, you know what, we're going back to 11-7. They'll make an adjustment subsequently.
Yeah.
But for tonight, you got Gensel with Point and Kucherov. You got Hagel, Cirelli, and Paul. Remember, you were talking about Nick Paul and like what he has showed these last couple of games, particularly the last couple of games, given a little bit more with Point out of the lineup. And Paul has played with these guys before earlier in the year. Then you got Gonsalves, Geeky, and Chafee, and they were kind of sort of aligned when the Lightning went 11-7. One of the wingers was sometimes bumped up. And then you've got Gergensons, Glendening, and Asimont. Radish basically takes Perbix's spot on the bottom pair with Lilleberg, and the top 4 are how they've been: Moser, Hedman, McDonough, Chernak. I am glad to see Gage Gonsalves get another game. You had mentioned yesterday, Greg, like, what does this do to a young player's confidence? And he has really 2 really impressive games, especially the one on Saturday. And, okay, kid, you're going back down.
Tough pill to swallow.
Well, yeah, and that wasn't ever the case. So in retrospect, they probably wanted to see what was going on with Point. I think it was more about just saving a little cap money for a couple of days.
Which you've talked about.
Yeah.
This year. I mean, that is part of the process.
Whatever the Lightning might want to do later this year, leading up to the trade deadline or at the trade deadline, really every dollar they can save leading up to that point will help them maybe make a deal. So they had a couple of days off. They sent Gonsalves down. He's back up. So, you know, they saved a couple of days.
I think it also signals to the team that if you're playing well, you're going to play. And I think this organization over the last decade has always been that way. I mean, let's look at this year. Connor Sherry didn't show enough, was sent down. It's a hard thing to do when you're paying somebody that type of money with a team who is strapped financially. But you make that decision strategically. You look at Geeky, who was playing well, makes the team out of camp. And Gonsalves, we talked about the young depth down in Syracuse.
Yeah.
This is the first time, I think, in the last few years, and maybe a handful, where they have some reinforcements along the way. The key is, and this is what Gonsalves is doing, you got to build on it with the opportunity that you're given. You can't just be somebody who takes up space. And the Lightning must have been listening to the show.
Yes,
because they were like, you know what, those guys hit the nail on the head. He needs to be up there. And what's interesting is the third line. That's a young line. NHL experience-wise.
It's a young line.
When you think about it, I mean, not a ton of NHL experience. I like it.
Honestly, Greg, I actually felt Gonsalves showed best when he's actually not playing on that line. Like, I think he had his best moments in these last 2 games when he was playing in the Winnipeg game with Cirelli and Hagel, and then when he was playing with Gensel and Paul against the Devils. Now, the Gensel-Paul unit, like, that's no longer a unit, right? But we'll see. I mean, the Lightning very easily, if things start the way that they don't want them to start in this game, and Coop's like, all right, I need to kind of go back to the drawing board here. He could swap, for example, Paul and Gonçalves. And Gonçalves could be back with Hagel and Cirelli. He played with them a bit in the Winnipeg game, and just move Paul back to your third-line center, which is kind of where he's been for about half the season. He started the year playing on the second line with Hagel and Cirelli, but kind of after the early games, he was locked in as the third-line center. You could have Geekie back on the wing. You could have Geekie left wing, Paul in the middle, Chafee on the right wing. That's not how they're starting this game, but we'll see. All of this is a way of complementing what Gonçalves showed over the bulk of the 2 games that he played.
Yeah.
But specifically when he was given an opportunity to play in a top 6 role. We'll see what happens tonight.
For
sure. Both Gabby and Ed Encina, who are here, tweeted about the power play. And I just wanted – I kind of watched, I kind of didn't. I was doing some stuff on the computer, but I was watching when they were practicing the power play. So Point, obviously, is on power play 1. Mm-hmm. He's there with Kucherov, Hedman, Gensel, and Hagel. That's the unit. They had Chafee slotting in for Hagel at practice yesterday in the first power play unit. So both Gabby and Ed tweeted out, quote, I see Point at the left circle on the power play with Hagel in the bumper spot. That would be a change. That would be a fairly drastic change from how they've run their power play. Could we see that tonight? Sure, we could. When I saw the power play practicing, Point was in the bumper spot. Hagel was at the left circle. So maybe I was watching when they weren't, and they were watching when I wasn't, because I was looking at some other stuff and getting ready for the show. But I think they practiced a couple of different formations. I would be a little surprised if you're moving Brayden Point out of the bumper spot. He's got 5 power play goals this year.
I don't think we need to overthink it. This is one of those where don't overthink it.
Well, they're practicing some different things. Let's see how it looks tonight. Let's see how it looks tonight.
I feel like that's
poor as the Penguins have been defensively, and they have been poor. They're 32nd in goals allowed per game. Their penalty kill has actually been okay. They're over 81% on the penalty kill. So, we'll see. We'll see how the special teams battle.
How many goals does Hagel have this year? Off the top of your head?
Well, I'm not going to go off the top of my head. I'm going to look it up. He's got 8.
Okay. Because, part of me thinks, are you trying to get Hagel going in some capacity to want him be in the bumper slot? I don't reinvent the wheel on this.
Generally, if you're in the bumper spot, again, a righty or a lefty, if you're in the bumper spot, you want to make yourself available for a shot on your forehand on a one-timer. It doesn't have to be that way. But Kucherov is at the right circle. Mm-hmm. So the play to Hagel in the middle would not really be a one-timer.
No.
It would be like a shot pass tip situation where he's like redirecting it on his forehand. We'll see.
Yeah. I don't want to overthink that one until we see it.
But I just wanted to clarify that in case people are following on social media and they're like, oh, well, they made this big change on the power play. Let's wait and see. And look, if they do that tonight, we can talk about it on the show tomorrow and see how it worked.
You know what's interesting? You mentioned Cirelli and Hank.
The last thing I'll say is by putting Brayden Point at the left circle, you were opening up the one-timer at that spot.
That is correct.
That would be the purpose, really, of putting Point there. To put him in a trigger spot, just at a different spot of the ice.
We've talked about that. You're going to be presented opportunities with that cross-ice pass from Kucherov.
Yes.
We've talked about it's just a matter of you're not going to replace Stamkos because of his shot, but can you get somebody that has a threat for the one-timer? I personally would keep Point where he is and find somebody else who has that ability to at least get the shot on net, but I'm okay with experimenting. That's fine. I think especially against Pittsburgh, I wouldn't overthink it too much is what I'm getting at. I think what we're also finding out is that Cirelli and Hagel can play with a lot of different guys, can't they?
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing. And, maybe Geekie looked his best when he was playing with those guys. Mm-hmm. I think Nick Paul, I think Paul's going to mesh well with them. And why do people mesh well with those two? Every player can get a little fancy, but those two guys, you know what you're going to get. It's a lot of up and down, hard on pucks, and it makes it easier to create room out there for the other player. And I think that can be a slump buster line. You got a guy struggling, you could put him with Hagel and Cirelli, And let's see what happens. And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Geekie back up with that line.
I was going to make that point. So I talked about them moving Gonsalves up. They
Yeah.
also could move Geekie up.
Correct.
But they're going to start with Paul at right wing and see how it goes.
Yeah.
Tonight.
Paul, I will give credit where credit is due. I mean, he is. I think we have seen he has high end ability. I mean, there are some skill sets that he has that make you say, yeah, that guy in the right setting might be a top 6 forward. He's got a great shot. We've talked about that. He's got a good feel for passing, can win some faceoffs. He's physical. I mean, there's a lot to like about Nick Paul. And if you don't see him in a top 6, can he be somebody who drives a line as your third line center? And I think that's a fair question. But we talk about guys taking advantage of the opportunities, partner. You know, Nick Paul is somebody who's taken advantage of some of these opportunities playing in an elevated role, and he has not looked out of place at all. And so, again, we talk about being rewarded to a degree. I'm not sure if this is the example, but if it is, I like it because Paul is saying, you're giving me more minutes, potentially. I'm playing with better playmakers, and I'm delivering. And I think he can be a real big part of what the Lightning want to do, offensively, but also be a responsible two-way forward as well. Listen, tonight, the Lightning are going to get chances. This is going to be one of those games where you can't cheat and develop bad habits.
Mm-hmm.
The Penguins will turn the puck over. They aren't very good 5-on-5. Their defensemen constantly pinch in the offensive zone, even when they shouldn't. I don't think Erik Karlsson is too interested in defending. That shouldn't be a newsflash. But they have struggled mightily, outside of basically, not a surprise, the Sidney Crosby line, and Evgeny Malkin has looked really good this year. But they are a team, Dave, where you can generate scoring chances, and you shouldn't have to cheat for them. So don't get into some bad habits tonight and allow Pittsburgh to, they get out to a 3-1 lead, and you find yourself saying, okay, how did that happen?
Yeah, I feel that happens a lot in this building. We've talked about that. I mean, I have the numbers to back it up. This is regular season. They've done better in the 2 playoff series they've had against Pittsburgh, one of which they won, one of which they lost.
Right.
But they went 3-1 in this building in 2011. They went 2-2 in this building in 2016, even though they lost that series. Regular season, though, since November 12th, 2010, so almost 14 years ago to the day, I believe that was their first game played in this building. The Lightning have just 4 wins in 20 games. I have the Pittsburgh record. Pittsburgh is 16-3-1 in the last 20 home games, and that goes back to the opening of this building where the Lightning were no longer playing across the street at the Igloo. So, look, I kind of sense that. And you look at those numbers, and it's like, that's kind of like Minnesota. That's kind of like St. Louis numbers that we've been talking about, except they played more in Pittsburgh because usually they're playing, 1 or 2 times a year over this time period. So, Eric Erlandson had a good article on his website this morning talking
Subscribe today.
Subscribe to lightninginsider.com. And, he kind of broke down what the Lightning have been doing better defensively, and he had it wasn't just him, like he had the players and Coop talking about this, and they really mentioned puck management and not turning pucks over that would feed the other team's counterattack. So basically, like near the offensive blue line. And then you might be giving up an odd man rush coming the other way.
Yep.
And like the Lightning say, we have not done this the last couple of games, and that is true. I would add to that, though, that is not the only part of playing good team defense, because you could have problems even when you are not giving up 2-on-1s and odd man rushes. Like you could have breakdowns in your own zone, leave guys open in front. This has been a problem at points, certainly recently, the Lightning failing to clear the zone, where that's not really a turnover leading to an odd man rush, but it is a turnover, and it's allowing the other team to have an extended offensive zone shift, and maybe something bad happens. I think the Lightning this is what Coop talked about, like they've had 5 guys in a solid position defensively, and they've checked. And I think that has really helped them minimize the number of scoring chances against. So what you said is, you can't abandon those good habits tonight. That is what I'm going to be looking for. Yep. Are they checking? are they not giving up freebies? And that can be freebies leading to odd man rushes for the Penguins, or freebies with sloppy puck play coming out of the defensive zone. Hard to be in position defensively when you were in a position for a breakout. You're not positioned in a way that would prevent the other team from scoring when you're thinking this puck is coming out of the defensive zone.
Sure.
So let's see how they handle that tonight against the Penguins, who, I mean, some teams score a lot and give up a lot. The Penguins are giving up a lot, and they're really not even scoring a lot. I mean, they're under 3 goals a game. So, yes.
They're not good
Crosby,
5-on-5.
Crosby, Malkin, I think they both have 19 points this
they're
year.
close to a point per game. I
And
think,
Beauvillier, you mentioned him. He's got 6 goals, and he's
yeah.
popped in. He's playing on the line with Crosby. So, like, how does that happen? Like, hey,
You
you're
should
playing
score,
with
right?
Sid,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you go to the net, and you can pop in some goals.
They got
But-
Raquel, who's, he can be a guy who can
he's
hurt
the
you a little
right
bit.
winger on that line. He's
Yeah.
got 6 goals. So look, they've gotten some scoring, but it's been at the top of their lineup. And the 2 stud defensemen who you would look to produce offensively, Carlson has not done a lot. He's got 2 goals, and Letang has been hurt. Well, actually, he's been ill, but he's only got 6 points in 18 games.
It's been atrocious. And this is kind of, you got salary wrapped up into 4 players, basically.
Yeah.
And Carlson, if you're not putting up 100 points and you're going to be a 50-point defenseman with your defensive issues, you're not really as valuable as you can be. And that's kind of what they're doing. They've got some young players, Mish. You'll see them tonight kind of being infused in the lineup. I think
Poolin's a first-round pick.
You got to play them at this point. You got to see what you have in that talent. The only way the Lightning struggle in this game is if they allow the Crosby line to capitalize, and they can, to really take control. As you know, Crosby's hard on pucks. He's very good on the forecheck. Brian Rust, who's kind of gone back and forth playing with Malkin and Crosby, is a really good player. So, but the Crosby line, you control the Crosby line, you have a really good chance of coming away with a couple of points, because on the flip side, their goaltending has been not what it should be. And
it sounds like Jari's getting the start tonight. They had an optional skate this morning, the Penguins. They have some injuries, and like you mentioned, Letang has been battling an illness. So possible he comes back tonight. Possible Kevin Hayes, who's been out for 6 games, comes back. So we'll see what their lineup looks like. Before we get to Deandra, I want to mention a stat that I noted in the game notes, which it was on the Pittsburgh side of the game notes, but it struck me because I never really looked at it this way. And you have talked a lot about growing up idolizing Mario Lemieux and how, like in your mind, he's the greatest player you've ever seen.
Correct.
So they have a stat here: most goals by a number 1 overall pick NHL history. So Ovechkin obviously is number 1, right? Because Gretzky, I don't think Gretzky was drafted, right? He was drafted, I think,
true.
The WHA.
Right.
Went with Edmonton, the NHL. Anyway, had there been a draft where Gretzky just went like
number 1 overall
years later, he would have been number 1 overall. Anyway, so they have games played and goals. So Ovechkin, who's been hot, but he got hurt last night. I don't know if you saw that.
I didn't see that, no.
Yeah, he got injured. So for his sake, hopefully it's not a serious injury or anything long term. So Ovechkin's at 868. Gretzky holds the goal record at 894. So he's closing in. He's 26 goals away from tying, 27 from passing him. But the reason this is in there is Crosby is 3rd. So this is a list of number 1 overall picks, goals. Crosby is 3rd. He's at 599. He's hit that mark in 1,292 games. So he's played about 150 games less than Ovechkin, which speaks to Crosby's had injury problems. They came into the league at the same time.
Yeah.
Ovechkin hasn't, comparatively speaking. So Lemieux is 2nd. Lemieux scored 690 goals. So, that's a fair distance behind Ovechkin. It's almost 200 goals less than Ovechkin.
Games played, though, right?
Lemieux did it in 915 games.
It's incredible.
So hear me out here. Lemieux has played more than 500 fewer games than Ovechkin. So if we even try and prorate, and I'm okay prorating this for reasons I'm going to give, if we give Lemieux, if we extend his career by another 1/3, so let's say round up to 1,000, he's 500 games behind. Let's give him another 500 games. he obliterates whatever Ovechkin could do. He obliterates Gretzky's record.
I know.
Because he's basically hitting about 350 goals every 500 games. So we add 350 goals to his total. He's well over 1,000 goals.
It's incredible. I mean, that's actually incredible.
And you're like, all right, how can you prorate it? Well, I'm prorating it because Lemieux actually got some of these games at the end of his career.
Yeah.
When, like, some people are like, well, you know, he didn't play until he couldn't play anymore. Lemieux kind of did. Like, he came back. He was an older guy. Basically, if you look at the start of his career to the end of his career, just in terms of the years, it's comparable to Ovechkin's. Just Lemieux missed prime years.
Big time prime years.
Bad back, cancer, 3-year layoff, all of that. So if we're going to give Lemieux those games in the prime of his career, I have no doubt that he's going to maintain his pace. So, look, he can't get back the games that he missed.
Sure.
But I think it illustrates, and look, again, we talked about this. Lemieux played when scoring was higher. You know, he entered the league when scoring was higher. You know, he kind of finished up as we got into the dead puck era. I mean, he was there when things were tightening up. But again, you know, he didn't have the equipment that Ovechkin has had, right?
Sure.
You know, I mean, I don't know if Lemieux played with a wooden stick or not, but like I looked at that and I'm like, if Mario had not missed all of this time, he would have set the goal record, and it would have been untouchable.
And this is, again, Gretzky was able to stay healthy and did it, and for that you appreciate being able to do it. But I told you, he's the only player in the top 10 who has played less than 1,000 games with his point total.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing. You kind of take a look at that and you're like, wow.
Well, I don't think he would have caught Gretzky's assists or points had he stayed healthy.
No.
But the goals, like, you're talking 4 digits easily.
I mean, even
maybe
if you said...
maybe he gets to 1,100 goals.
Yeah.
Based on, like, how productive would he have been in the time that he missed?
Well, and as you said...
he was in his prime.
In his prime, I mean...
And he was also...
dominating.
Like, the Penguins were really good.
Yeah, right.
During a lot of the time that he missed.
I mean, you know, you look at some of their lines...
Not at the end. Like the 3 years that he missed near the end, they were starting to dip. But like the time that he missed in the 90s, and it wasn't always a full season, but he missed a big chunk of time when he had his leukemia. I mean, the Penguins were one of the top teams in the league. How many games are you going to give him for that?
Doing his chemo treatment and coming back and playing that night and score. Like, he's just... look, I hear all the arguments, and they're all valid. They really are. This isn't being a homer. And ask Phil this. He will. I mean, Phil has the ultimate respect. I don't think Phil, and I know it's a different question. I don't think Phil has ever seen a more talented player. I mean, and to me, when I watched him on the ice do the things he did, he was the unicorn. He was the unicorn.
Yeah.
And it was incredible. So.
Anyway,
you know,
I wanted to bring that up because
numbers put it in perspective.
When I looked at this stat,
did that hit?
And
did that hit
staggering.
A little bit, partner? Didn't it? That hit you a little bit.
Well, because he's right under Ovechkin, and you can see he has played more than 500 fewer games.
It's incredible.
I keep saying has. He played.
I know.
Like his career is over. Ovechkin keeps adding to his total, but the differential is over 500.
It really is incredible. It's just, I mean, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
All right. We've got our guest, don't we?
Yeah, Deandra's ready.
Deandra Loux, NHL reporter. She's been on Power Lunch before. She's on video with us. See, you know, this feels like so professional, the way we're able to see everybody. I really do feel like this is NHL Network style stuff. But Deandra, first off, it's great to be with you on Power Lunch again. And, you know, Mish and I were talking about Brayden Point coming back, which is obviously big news for the Lightning. And a real opportunity tonight to build off of what they've done the last 2 games against really good teams. What has kind of stood out for you as the Lightning are getting back on the winning track here?
Yeah, well, first of all, I can't start without mentioning the new setup. I really love it. I was scared that I was going to be the one guest that had trouble logging on, but luckily we figured it all out. I was in here 30 minutes ahead of time so that didn't happen. Yeah, no, I'm glad that Brayden Point, first of all, I'm glad he got to go on the road trip, because I did get to chat with him a little bit just off to the side. And I know he really wanted to go. And one of the things that he was talking about that maybe we don't really think too much about is, when you're injured, you're not skating with the team. And if you don't get to go on the road trip, like, you just feel like you're not a part of the team. So I know this was a goal for him. So I'm glad he got to come back. But yeah, I mean, listen, they just had two really big wins without Brayden Point, which against two really great teams. And they managed to kind of figure it out. I think we're still at the point in the season where I'm looking at last season and I'm looking at this season and I'm like, what has changed? What has improved? And what's the difference? Just with the dynamic of the guys. And when I'm in there asking them questions, a lot of them talk about guys like Ryan McDonagh coming back and what that's meant for them defensively, and Eric Chernak. And he really stands out to me because he was talking about what a difference it's made to have him back there, and that he communicates on the ice. He talks to them while they're playing, and he waits for him to kind of direct them on where to go and things like that. And that makes such a difference when you have like Mosier, who was such a good pickup this summer by Julian, and he's just blending in really well, which is something that I asked Coop about on Saturday. But overall, I look at things like that, like McDonagh coming back and the way Chernak has elevated his play. And then I think you guys were talking about this. I can't remember if it was earlier today or yesterday, but Nick Paul, we were talking about in the press box, has been standing out this season. And I know he trained with Kucherov this summer, and we kind of saw some of it last season, but I think the fact that he's been able to play, like, he could play on the third line and he's totally fine. Like, he's talked about it. I can be a bottom six guy and I'm going to do what I need to do. And I really don't care. Like, wherever they need me, I just want to win games. Or they could put him on the top line. Brayden Point is out and they need him. So I think that's made such a difference that he can kind of step in and Coop can plug him in where he needs to be. And guys like that make all the difference.
Deandra, maybe we were a little surprised when Gage Gonçalves was sent back to Syracuse after his performance in the last two home games. So I guess it wasn't surprising that he's back up and he's in the lineup tonight. What has he showed you from the start of training camp through the preseason and now his second basically go around in the NHL this year?
Yeah, well, sometimes guys come in and, when you've been around the team for a while, you can kind of pick up on who can kind of blend, who's a natural fit. And who maybe it's going to take them a little longer, but he seems like he has really, and I think of Chafee as one of those guys too, kind of seemed like he just immediately wanted to be there. But, I think he has worked his way and earned his way up to where he's at. I know when Phil says that he's impressed with a player, I think you can take that. Because it's hard to get that from Phil, but, he's earned a spot there. I was interested to see, I actually wasn't expecting, I didn't know if he was going to get called up because I knew Brayden Point really wanted to play and had a feeling that he was going to play. So when they called him back up this morning and they announced it, I'm happy that he's getting a chance because he's definitely worked to get there. That line is young. So, with Geeky and Chafee. So I'm interested to see what they do. But like we've seen in the past, when the guys come up from Syracuse, they want to be there. It's not that often that you get a chance to play and move up with the Lightning. It's either like an injury or whatever, stuff like that. So I'm excited to see what he can do. But yeah, he seems like he's ready to go. There's no fear there at all.
It's been fun watching Nick Paul, I think, this year, because I think he has elevated his play, and that may come with the opportunities, Deandra, that may come with the players he's playing with a little bit more. But he's always been a guy who's got a lot of tools, I think, in that toolbox. And, maybe the question is, what type of player ultimately could he be? Is he more of a third-line guy, or is he somebody who could fit in a top six and, really be a nice power forward in a lot of ways? I think with Gonçalves playing the way he is and, with Point being out, it allowed Paul maybe to be put in some different situations, and he's done very well. Where do you see kind of Paul moving forward? Is this somebody you're intrigued by the potential and what he's done, and you want to see a bigger look, a longer look in a top six? Or do you feel like in a perfect world, if Nick Paul is your third line center, that means you've got a really deep team?
Yeah, I think the thing with Nick Paul is like he didn't show up like this. He worked to get to this point, and I've watched him the past few seasons work to be more outspoken, work to be a leader, work to kind of be that guy that he'll do anything to win. And I think, yeah, he fit in from a culture standpoint, right? He fit into the locker room pretty quickly, but he kind of had to earn the spot that he has. And I think this year, heading into this season, right, there's a lot of leadership changes, right? You take out, the captain of your team. Well, other guys that have been waiting to lead were right there. He's one of those guys. And, I listened to him talk about how he stayed this summer in Tampa because he wanted to get better. He wanted to be able to play with Kucherov and just be the best that he could be, but while also keeping in mind that he's fine going wherever. So I think, I think he's slowly earning his spot, but also, Coop shuffles the lines a lot. I don't think he's going to have a permanent spot where he's just a top 6 guy. I think it's actually a better position for the fact that he can go anywhere. So if there are, God forbid, injuries in the season, they make it to the playoffs and there's injuries, Nick Paul can slot him wherever Coop needs him. And that's a really valuable asset. We've seen guys like Cirelli kind of be able to do that as well. And in a league that is so difficult and the salary cap is what it is, that's a really good quality for a player to have, for sure.
Lightning came out of that week-long break with 2 really good defensive performances. What did you see from them that led to the solid defensive outings against Winnipeg and New Jersey?
Yeah, well, I mean, and we talked to the guys about this, and a few weeks ago, like I mentioned, I asked Chernak about him, like, what's the difference? Like, what's your guys' goal? What are you looking to do? And he said, we don't want to rely on scoring. Like, we want to get back to playing the defense that we played when we won the cup, because the second McDonough came back, he said they just picked up where they left off and they were on a mission. And so I think, the biggest thing, they're not turning the puck over like they were. And I feel like we all kind of resort to what happened last season and we're like, oh God, please don't do that, but it seems like they really have made an effort, especially on this break, to really focus on that. And I think having McDonough back I know that it makes such a difference for the guys. Like, they listen to him, they look to his leadership, and not turning the puck over. That was their biggest issue. And it always, it led to way too many goals. So that was the biggest thing. And I know Coop said, like, they're finally playing the way that they're supposed to play defensively. So I think just, little details, puck management. And then you've got Hedman and McDonough back there. And Chernak seems like a different guy this year. He seems more confident, more comfortable with McDonough there.
Yeah, and I think, you talk about the domino effect. I think that's kind of the hope is, McDonough comes back and your top 4, but you also get, Eric Chernak righted in a lot of ways. Deandra, last question for me. When you take a look just in general at the Atlantic Division, do you still feel like it's a 3-team race, basically, or do you feel like there's some other surprises potentially in the Lightning's division?
I mean, going into this season, I was expecting a little more from Detroit. I was expecting a little bit from Buffalo.
Yeah.
And now
I think everybody was with Detroit.
Yeah. And now I'm like, well, is it going to be the same crew again? It appears so. We'll see what happens with Boston. I mean, it's still early in the season. I know that the sky is falling in Boston, but there's still plenty of time. We know so much can happen in a hockey season, but it's kind of looking right like it's the same crew all over again. I think from the Lightning standpoint, I feel like this team, I know it's still a work in progress, but I've been really impressed with the way this team, one, is not scared of a deficit. Nothing, they don't care. There's no fear. They have a lot of young energy. I think they're a stronger overall team. And so they're going to be in a better position this season. And we'll see what happens with Toronto. I just looked at the schedule and remembered that they come to Tampa soon. But, we'll see. It looks like it's going to be the Panthers are a really solid team again this year too. So looks like it's going to be Florida, Toronto, and Tampa yet again.
Yet again. Doesn't
really no
change.
Complaints though. You know what I mean?
That's true. That's very true.
Everybody counted the Lightning out, and we'll see what happens. But I think they put together a good team. I like what I'm seeing so far from them.
Keep it going tonight against a struggling Pittsburgh team. Deandra, thank you for coming on. We always appreciate it. We're going to do it again soon. And where can people check you out? on X
I
and
feel
everywhere.
Yeah, it's X. I call it Twitter still. I
know,
don't know.
It's just what the cool kids say.
I'm just gonna call it Twitter. You guys can find me on Twitter. I'm pretty active on there. And then I don't know. I joined the Blue Sky app. There's a lot of Lightning fans over there. I'm still remembering that I have it. I'm not good with all the. I got to go back and forth. But yeah, find me on Twitter. That's probably the best spot.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you. Enjoy the game tonight, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks,
All right,
Deandra.
talk soon. Thank you.
All right. Deandra Loux joining us right there. We always appreciate having her on. If people want to react to the conversation, they can do that on Twitter or X. It is.
We
fun.
know what you mean.
We know that's one of those things we definitely know.
Yes.
What you're talking about at Bolts Radio. Do you want to get into questions, or was there anything you wanted to comment
in fact,
on?
I have one that was sent prior
Oh,
to
no.
yesterday's show.
Did I miss it?
Well, it was emailed to me. It was from Jim in Jacksonville.
Jim, I
So
love Jim.
Let me find it because it went back a few days. So this is a question that he posed on Friday, but it got sent to me on Friday, and he sent it to our email address after Friday's show. So we just missed one show, Jim. Sorry about that. So he is kind of posing the idea based on like the Devils play the Panthers twice on Tuesday and Thursday in the same location.
Mm-hmm.
So he is saying my idea, the Lightning, for example, every year play each team in the Metropolitan Division 3 times. I would like to see the teams that we play twice on the road make just one trip, and the teams that come to Tampa twice make just one trip, and you play almost like a 2-game mini series. And we saw that during the 2021 season pretty frequently in the divisional play, and that was kind of related to dealing with COVID and you wanted to minimize travel.
I think a lot of people like that, didn't they?
Yeah.
I felt like
So the Lightning actually had this in New Jersey, I want to say 2 years ago. They played, and the teams played 3 times in the span of a week. So they played Tuesday and Thursday in New Jersey, and then they played at Amalie that Sunday. And sometimes we see, a series get wrapped up pretty quickly. Like the Lightning are done with Minnesota and Winnipeg already. And sometimes it's even in the East, like you bang out. If it's the other division, you bang out the 3 games in a short period of time. I'm not opposed to that idea, Jim, because he brings up the fact that it cuts down on travel and all of that. Sorry, my computer is making beeps at me, and I'm trying to make it stop, but it's hard for me to multitask while I'm talking with you on the air, so apologize, folks. There's a reason, I think, why the league has not done this universally or more regularly. It's kind of a once in a blue moon type situation, like the Panthers just had it with Florida. The Lightning actually have it with a divisional opponent, Ottawa, this year. Ottawa plays 2 games in Tampa in early February, in a Tuesday and a Thursday. That's within the division. You're playing 2 and 2, but the 2 games in Tampa are getting knocked out for Ottawa on one trip. I'm not opposed to the idea, but I think that there is probably a reason why the league does not kind of incorporate this more regularly. Maybe it's based on building availability or teams' travel schedules. Like they need to hit you when you go to an area, you need to play a certain number of opponents to help kind of maximize what you're doing on the road. And maybe if you had to play 2-game sets all the time, the trip would get too long. I don't know. I think the league probably has reasons for why we don't see this more regularly, but that's the best answer I can give you, Jim. But I actually don't mind it to almost set up like a playoff series. Whether you're playing a team 3 times in a season or 4 times in a season, to knock out those 2 road games on one trip means that you don't have to go back.
I don't mind it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I've thought long and hard about it, but
well, you're not getting on the airplane, but yes.
It's true. That is very true. Lucas says, if Point is moved to the left, it has to be Coop wanting that right shot one-time option to keep teams from cheating Kucherov. Hagel can handle the bumper fine. If Point adds a potent one-timer to his game, makes him that much more dangerous.
Yeah, we'll see, Lucas. I'm telling you, when I saw the power play work this morning, Point was in his usual spot. So if they put him there, we'll see how it goes tonight.
Yeah.
And Greg and I will talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, being a little more versatile with what you can do, where you can play. Some of that makes sense, I think, in a perfect world. I would not tinker with Brayden Point. Just wouldn't do it. This guy's a 50-goal scorer.
Mm-hmm.
Let him be who he is. Let him be who he be. Kind of get that way. Al says, the next two games are big, guys. Both teams might be considered lesser opponents. Well, I mean, come on. Let's not sugarcoat it. Yes. So can Tampa Bay not play down to the opponent's level? And can Tampa Bay give the same effort as the last two games? With games in hand and Thanksgiving just around the corner, it's time to make a statement. I think you can make a case the Lightning made a statement if you want to go.
Wins.
Yeah, I don't know. Look, if they come out and drop the next two, I think people who believe they've been inconsistent are going to drum that pretty hard. Hey, this is a team that gets up for the good teams and down for the bad teams, and
they've also been a much better home team than road team this year, and they are on the road for these next two.
Pittsburgh's always been, and you brought it up, they're a team regardless of where they are, and it's weird saying this, but the last couple of years they have not been a playoff team. They've just been a team that has given the Lightning some uncomfortable moments. I mean, this is Tristan Jarry who scored an empty netter.
Yeah.
Jeff Carter, doesn't score all year, has a goal when he was playing. I mean, things happen. And what I think some people are failing to understand here too, Tampa Bay is still here. They are still the measuring stick for most teams. So, of course, a team like Pittsburgh, who is very inconsistent, can find a consistent performance, and it's usually against the really good teams, because if you don't do it, you're going to be embarrassed. There's that dynamic that you need to bring up. Mm-hmm. Pittsburgh should be up for this game. Pittsburgh should give Tampa Bay all they can handle. The question is it going to be enough for them to get points? And usually throughout the last decade, Tampa Bay and Pittsburgh have been pretty evenly matched talent-wise. That's not the case this year. And one thing to keep in mind, too. The Penguins are horrendous. Terrible. They're horrendous in protecting leads. They were up. Who was the last game? 3-0?
Yeah, against San Jose.
But I mean, Dave, this goes back the last 2 or 3 years. And you always talk about this when the Lightning score. Important shift after a goal.
Mm-hmm.
Pittsburgh is like the poster child for give up that goal right after you score and then scoring late in periods.
Yeah, those are two cardinal sins.
And that's a sign of a bad team. And that's what they are. They're not a good team. It doesn't mean they can't put in a good performance tonight, but they are a bad team. So is this a big game? It's a big game from the perspective of the Lightning have games in hand. They can munch some points, and boy, did they get off to a really good start in doing that by taking on two really good teams and beating them. Don't waste it tonight with a flat effort. Steven says, 2/26/23, Kucherov hits 700 points during a game. So he's saying February 26th, 2023, Kucherov hits 700 points during a game at Pittsburgh in which they got pumped 7-3. Chance he hits 900 in the same building. Remarkable how fast he's climbing towards 1,000, maybe this season.
Yeah. We were surprised. Hagel was in a list of top 5 players for the Lightning. Like, he was in the top 5 for most points in the first 200 games of the Lightning. Nick Paul's playing his 200th game with the Lightning tonight. And I was like, how is Nikita Kucherov not on that list? And Steve looked it up, and Kucherov kind of had, like his first year, he was up for the final 2/3 or so, and he wasn't like getting crazy high point totals. And his point production really skyrocketed about year 3 to year 4 in the NHL. But yeah, I mean, since then, he has been like these milestone markers. Like, how quickly is he getting from 600 to 700, 700 to 800, 800 to now 899? They actually have a similar stat in the Pittsburgh game notes about Crosby with his goals. Like, how many games did it take him to get from goal 1 to 100 and then 101 to 200? And what's been interesting, Greg, like, he's been so consistent. The longest stretch, I'm talking about Crosby now, the longest stretch, and this is games required. It's not like did he missed time with injuries. It's just counting the games that he played. His longest stretch was goal 400 to 500. It took him 239 games. Then that's the high end. Most of the others are in the like low 200s. He's at 216 right now. So if he scores tonight, he'll get from 500 to 600 in 217 games. I mean that. So here's 1 to 100 was 217, 100 to 200 he did 178. So I mean he skyrocketed there. 200 to 300, 227, 300 to 400, 218, the 239 for 400 to 500, and he's going to break that. I mean, he's going to get to 600 in way less than 239 games. So it's like Crosby is incredibly productive, but also consistent. Like it's not like he had a 100 stretch of goals that took him 300 games, right? Yeah. Where he had a real slump. And so Cooch is kind of the same way. Like once Cooch kind of got going, he has been super consistent.
He's super consistent and explosive. I actually think, and I want everybody to hear me. Hear me. Get the wax out of yours. Hear me. I told you about Vasi. I think when you have an opportunity to watch potentially the best of all time at your position, at any position, kind of embrace that, understand what you're doing. And I think Vasi's numbers really stood out. Mm-hmm. Kucherov's not going to go down as the best player of all time. But in terms of the points, he's got a chance to be in that top 10 if he's on this pace. If he continues to be on this pace and stays relatively healthy, he's got a chance to be in the top 10 all time in scoring. He just does. Because I've made the comment, and when they put him in the Hall of Fame, part of his speech will be number one BS, no doubt.
Yes.
But it will also be, and when I listen to Power Lunch on Lightning Power Play, Greg Linnelli once said many times over, and I agree with it, that I could roll out of bed and get 2 points. That is true. He is a guy, you look at the score sheet, there are nights where you're like, Kucherov's got 2 secondary assists. Yeah. You know? That's a sign of a great player. We know that. But I'm trying to put it in context here for people because I do think you're looking at somebody who can be that dynamic when it comes to total points in the NHL. And so I think he has a real good chance to be that. So embrace it, everybody. Embrace it. What other questions did he have? Looking through, this one was from Knoll Time, and this is, Dave, I know you don't like the big picture questions, and this one is certainly somebody's opinion, and I don't really know how they equate it. They said, curious to get your thoughts on ESPN's franchise rankings the next 3 seasons, plus this one. ESPN has the Lightning ranked 24th. I just think the national media can't wait for the Lightning to fail. I mean, I don't think that's the case.
Franchise rankings, is that based on ice or kind of, remember when the Lightning were named number 1 franchise, it was all inclusive? I can't believe that if we're taking into account all inclusive, it would be 24th. So I'm guessing that is ESPN is looking at roster makeup and kind of prospects.
NHL Future Power Rankings, prospect cap, roster predictions.
Yeah, so it's on ice. So, look, Knoll Time, I think that the easy way to look at the Lightning is window is closing. That's just the way to look at it. If you're like, well, they won 2 cups, and they got to the final and lost, and they've gone out in the first round the last 2 years. Everybody's getting older. Stamkos is not there anymore. They're on – the window is closing, and they are going to trend down. That's what that ranking says to me. And also, let's be honest, I mean, the Lightning haven't had a lot of high draft picks to get highly touted prospects. They acquired one in Connor Geekie, but he's kind of the only guy at this point. I mean, we talked a little bit about Isaac Howard. He's a first-round pick, but he was a late first-round pick, and maybe they aren't feeling that he is going to be like a guy who turns into a difference-making player. I think that ranking may be right. I mean, time will tell. But over the next 3 years, very few players who we would say are in the Lightning's core will kind of be at the point of aging out. McDonough's 35. Where will he be at 38? Assuming he stays with the Lightning? Unknown. Like, some players are still able to play at a high level at 38. Some players aren't. But if we're looking at, like, Point, Kucherov, Vasilevsky, Cirelli, Hagel, Paul, Chernak, even Hedman. You know, Hedman's going to be 34, so he's a little behind McDonough, but I'll include him in that based on how well he skates, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do we really believe that, like, those players aren't going to be able to be productive still? So I don't buy the easy answer because I think it's a little more nuanced than that. I think the Lightning have done well to find some players who can be NHLers without having high draft picks. By high, I'm talking about like top 10 in the first round, where you're getting difference-making players, generational type players. Those players haven't been available for the Lightning based on where they finished in the standings. Okay. So we see all these rankings. The Lightning's, you know, depth, their minor league system, whatever,
right.
Like it ranks near the bottom. And time will tell. I mean, Gage Gonsalves looks like an NHLer to me. You know, they acquired Brandon Hagel. When Brandon Hagel was turning pro and he was in the prospect department, did people think that he would turn into a 25, 30 goal scorer who's a top 6 guy, plays power play, penalty kill, even strength? 5-on-6, 6-on-5. So it's hard to predict the future. Now, we look at a guy like Connor McDavid when he comes into the NHL, you're like, okay, this guy's going to be a dominant player. Clearly, that's kind of a slam dunker. For most other players, it's a little more nuanced. And I think the same is true for franchises. Now, the Penguins, it is clear that to some extent the die has been cast. They made their choice to hang on to some of their core players at the expense maybe of trying to retool and transition. They have not been able to get a lot of high draft picks because they've been just good enough, right? They've re-upped a lot of the guys who are now, like, Letang is, 38? Malkin, I think, is 37, 38 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's nearing the end. Very few players play into their 40s. I mean, just think about the Pittsburgh Penguins voluntarily traded Jake Gensel.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we can get into the reasons why they did that, right? Cap reasons. They couldn't extend him. They saw the writing on the wall. Here's a guy who's in the prime of his career. Lightning fans now have seen this guy for, 16 games. He's a high-end player in the NHL. They traded him away because of other decisions that they made leading up to the point that he was going to be a UFA.
Right.
They are in a different boat. The Lightning are not in that boat.
No.
They are not. So I don't know where they're going to be in 3 years, but
who cares?
I would, yeah. Like, I mean,
I get
you brought
that
up. That's why you have to take those rankings with a grain of salt.
It's lazy to include prospects in this ranking for the Lightning because they're players who are driving things or in the prime of their careers, and they're going for it every year. So your prospect pool is going to be limited. So that's a flawed argument for the Lightning's sake. How many championships have they had during that time? Nobody cares what this is going to look like in 3 years. Quite frankly, I don't. I understand the window's open. You go for it every year, whether that's Tanner Jeannot, whether that's Savard at the deadline, whether that's Blake Coleman and, Goodrow.
Paul and Hagel.
They
were
You
deadline
swing for the
acquisitions.
fences every year as long as Kucherov, Vasi, and Hedman and Point are still there. That's how it's going to play out. All right,
Now, the last part about everybody wants to see the Lightning drop off, or like that, I'm not sure I agree with. I think ESPN is trying to do, like, the people they have there are looking at different teams, and I think they're not impartial because you have a bias based on what you believe, but I don't think they went into it thinking, well, we don't like the Lightning, so we're gonna put them 24th. I think that they're looking at the situation, and they're having to do 32 of these. So they're making a snap judgment, right?
And it got us to kill 5 minutes. And that's what we did.
Thank you, Noel Time.
Thank you, Noel Time. We appreciate that. We'll be back tonight. Pregame's at 6:30. Puck drops at 7. I will talk to you, partner, during the pregame, getting everybody set. And then we'll be in this setting tomorrow, noon to 1, talking about why the Lightning put up 9 goals against Pittsburgh and what that was like, and we'll kind of have some fun with that.
Look, they'll take that, but I would rather see
3-1.
rather
3-1.
Yeah, I would rather see I would rather focus on the goals against number, and let's see if they can get another one that's in the positive range. In other words, 2 or less.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Great job tonight.
All right.
Thank you, or today. Deandra, thank you for joining us.
Thank you,
and
Deandra.
We appreciate that, and thanks to Steve Versnick, our engineer. We will be with you again tomorrow, noon to 1, but again, tonight pregame starts at 6:30, and you can listen to all of the action right here on Lightning Radio.